You're listening to The Financial Doctor Show. Annie Osley started this podcast to help others reach their highest potential, to mine out their deepest gifts, and make this world a better place. She empowers masses to be the best version of themselves and to thrive both personally and in their business. Annie invites you to discover and put to use the most powerful resources you already have and celebrate life at its most powerful level. Annie is a best-selling author, a mother, educator, speaker, music lover, philanthropist, and a believer of dreams. She's also RBC's top financial specialist in Canada.
Good morning, everyone. This is Annie Osley, your financial doctor, and I'm extremely excited to announce today's guest, Miss Celina Caesar-Chavannes. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm very well, and thank you so much for coming on the show today. Those of you who don't know Celina, she is a business consultant, a coach, an international speaker, and a former MP. And not just any MP, she was actually the Parliamentary Secretary to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Parliamentary Secretary for International Development. She has been featured on Oprah Winfrey's magazine in April 2018, and her book, Can You Hear Me Now?, is scheduled to be published in February 2021. How are you doing? Tell us about your journey, please, because it's so much that you're doing for others.
Thank you so much for having me. It really is a pleasure, and I certainly do appreciate you using your platform to share stories. I really think that stories are sticky, and so having this opportunity is great. So as you mentioned, I'm a former elected official, member of Parliament with the Government of Canada. And prior to that, I owned a healthcare-based research management firm. So I ran clinical trials and co-chaired national epidemiology studies related to neurological conditions. And so I found a way to sort of marry the love that I had of business and research with the policy side through government, and thoroughly enjoyed that. Stayed for one term with the last Government of Canada. My book, as you mentioned, Can You Hear Me Now?, which is out in February. I just got my advanced copy, so it's exciting, and just looking forward to the journey ahead.
I love it. That's amazing. So, because you have the science background, so and I know that you are extremely big on mental health. In fact, you actually have been awarded the Champion of Mental Health Parliamentarian Award, the Canadian Alliance on Mental Illness and Mental Health Award. So I believe that in the current era of COVID, when statistically 40% of Canadians are suffering some form of mental health issues, what is your advice? How can anyone really get ahead and get out of that rabbit hole?
Yeah, so that's a very important question. And I think as we understand, it used to be 1 in 5 or 20% of Canadians were living with a mental illness. I've been very open with my journey around depression, major depressive disorder, and anxiety. And I think right now in COVID, it's sort of a double-edged sword. We're living in a pandemic where we have right now in Ontario, we have a stay-at-home order. So we're further isolated. So we're in these states of not being able to do the things that we usually are able to do to get out of the home. So whether we treat our depression, anxiety, or any other mental illness with some kind of exercise and being outdoors or socializing with friends or things like that, we don't have that capacity anymore. And on top of that, I think we layer on the fact that, especially for communities of color and in the Black community in particular, we had a very hard last few months, really unpacking even as far as last week with what happened in the United States, unpacking the racism that exists in Canada and in North America, and in fact, globally. And so on top of all of these other things, we're also dealing with very, very traumatic and traumatizing experiences that are happening in our world. So how do we deal with it? What I've been doing is I've at first saw my psychiatrist almost every day. At the beginning of the pandemic, it was really important for me to keep up with my medical appointments, or whether you're in therapy, you see your physician, whatever. I also have been quite remarkably very compliant with my medications, which sometimes is very difficult for people to do, especially when their brain is telling them not to be compliant. Meditation, exercise the way that you can, and then trying to still connect with people in the unusual ways via Zoom. It's difficult, but I think we still have to maintain those human connections in any way that we can. And one of the things that I noticed when I started talking about mental illness, or my mental illness in particular, the more I talked about it, the better it was for me to cope with it. And I said right off the top that stories are sticky. When we share our stories, I think it's really important that even in our vulnerability, even when we think we are being vulnerable or weak, or people are going to ridicule us for sharing some of these very hard experiences, those are the experiences, when you share them, that build resiliency in other people, and often build resiliency in yourself.
That's actually an excellent advice. I really appreciate that. You shared all this, and you have been vulnerable by sharing your own journey as well. So I certainly appreciate that. Now, because you also are a business consultant and coach, tell us about, how you can really help people. So what is it, in what capacity as a coach are you helping others?
So I am also a senior advisor for equity at Queen's University, and a adjunct lecturer with the university as well. And so what I've done over the last year, in conjunction with writing Can You Hear Me Now, and I should say that Can You Hear Me Now is a series of, it really talks about my political journey, but it also goes back and looks at my whole life, and really starts to tease out all the lessons that I learned from the mistakes that I've made. So talking about being vulnerable, I'm totally vulnerable in this book with the mistakes I made, but also the lessons that I learned. And what I is, because in a pandemic we have time to do things that we usually didn't think we would have time to do, I actually wrote a course on leadership and on authenticity. And the course is related to all of those mistakes that I've made in my life, and the how. So what do you need to do to avoid them? And when I do coaching, or I do executive coaching with a very small number of executives, what I use is the program that I developed in this course. And really, it's an understanding that when people think that they want success, or they want some kind of tangible next in their life, whether it's a promotion, or they want to start a new business, or to, do something else, really it's an understanding of how to get over that personal development challenge. So it's never really the tangible sort of thing. It really is about maximizing all of the potential that you have inside of you already to achieve that goal. And this course that I developed is the how do you understand your own personal worth? How do you give back? And those kinds of lessons. And so it's a series of stories and lessons, but it's also a lot of homework and activities that you have to do. You have to dig down deep inside and do the homework to be able to achieve the success and the results of the program.
This is absolutely amazing. I mean, you are literally preparing people to mine out all the good out of themselves, and then
Yes.
radiate it out to the world, right? So now,
yeah, and then I found that when I was coaching, like when you hear executive coaching, it's expensive. Like most people can't afford it, and I kept thinking, how can I make this program affordable for people who want to sort of understand? So how did Celina come from this immigrant girl at 2 years old navigate through systems, become an award-winning entrepreneur, and then the parliamentary secretary to the leader of a G7 country. Like, how do you do that? And I thought I could just write it down and give people the lessons of how I did it. And it was a lot of mistakes. And I just don't want people to make those same like mistakes that I made. But I also want people to know that if they do make mistakes, it's okay. Like, I've made them too. And this is what I learned from them. And this is how you can build after you've made those mistakes.
I love it. So you're really, really sharing not only your secret, but the actual secret sauce for everyone to actually get there. I love it. This is beautiful. Beautiful. So, because you actually are sharing a little bit of, just nuggets only about your own journey, do you mind sharing more, please?
Yes. So, you know what? I will say that one of the parts of the journey, of my journey. So if I could just tell you a little bit about my story. As I said, immigrated to Canada at 2 years old, did really well in school. And then I got to university and I actually failed out of university. I finished, but it took me 6 years to finish a 3-year degree. I just had such a hard time navigating that space. And after university, I thought, oh my God, like my life is over. I wanted to be a doctor. I can never be a doctor. I can't do anything. So I spent a couple of years just sort of nomadically wandering around, not trying to figure out what to do next. And so I went back to school and I met my first mentor or sponsor, I would say, and Dr. Carol Greenwood. And she really pushed me to be bolder, to do things that I didn't think I was able to do. And I would say she single-handedly turned my life around. I went back to school. I did a research course, then became a research assistant, research coordinator, did my first MBA, started a business, as I said, award-winning business, made lots of mistakes there. And every mistake I made, I wrote it down and I thought about how next time I won't make that mistake again, wrote that down too. And then decided that, I would enter into politics after, I did 2 MBAs. So I did a second executive MBA. And I'd say and then got into politics. And I'd say every decision, at every point, there was a certain amount of fear that I felt in going into the next. Like, how do I get from, failing university into going back to school? How do I become how do I, start a business? How do I get into politics? There was a certain amount of fear. And one of the first chapters, one of the first lessons in the program is around understanding that fear and not allowing it to paralyze. So fear has always been used by human beings. It activates the amygdala. It does, it releases adrenaline, and it has allowed us to survive, fight or flight mode, right? If a saber-toothed tiger was coming, like in generations past, we'd know how to deal with that. More contemporary threats that face us now, we're able to deal with that through understanding fear. So fear in moderation is really good. It's when it paralyzes you from doing what you want to do that's when it becomes problematic. So in the first chapter, I talk about the fact that I've always been fearful. I've always been fearful of every step that I take, but I use that fear to sort of propel me. I use that fear to push me forward. But I couldn't just do that by itself. I needed to understand all of the past hurts that I had, all of the things like failing out of university when you do, like as an immigrant child, as an immigrant woman, my parents told me, like, you have to go to school, you have to be educated, like that's your only job. And I'm totally bombing university. And so that was a real low point in my life. And using that sort of low point, using that fear, using that sort of being scared that I won't have success to as an adrenaline boost to do better was something that I value now. I value how you could use that and how it could help you blaze that trail that you want to blaze. I think the second thing that I've learned throughout this whole process is that life is not a competition, right? Like how I define success, how you define success, what you do in your life is not a competition. It's about really having purpose and using your passion to drive that purpose. And that is essentially the message of how you have, can you hear me now? It's how I got to that point of living authentically and having that passion and purpose, and really understanding that I need to be authentic. I can't try to be someone else. I can't compete with someone else. I have to set my own benchmark in order to be that authentic person and to have that success, however it's defined by individuals. And that for me was so transformative in my life, and has allowed me to appreciate even the painful moments that I've had in my life. It's allowed me to appreciate those.
This is such a beautiful story. So thank you so much for sharing it. And it really shows that, you know, the first thing is the realization, right? So you realize, wait a second, something is happening, but then, you know, the motivation of let's have it change. And for you, you know, you actually found a mentor, and the mentor was able to get you back on track and help you to really overcome whatever you needed to overcome to truly mine out, just as you said, the best version of Celina and becoming the light that you are today. So, and what I'm hearing, that's exactly what you're teaching in your course, right? So, how can anyone access that course or find out more about it if they want to? Because it's very intriguing.
Yeah, so it'll be launched on February 2nd. So the book is going to be launched on February 2nd. The course is going to be launched on February 2nd. The book is available through Penguin Random House. So you could either order it, just Can You Hear Me Now? Just Google Celina, Celina, and Can You Hear Me Now? And it'll pop up and you can order it there. But on my website, celinacc.ca, I'm going to have the course there. And it'll launch on February 2nd, so people could access it through there. And as I said, I really wanted it to be an opportunity for individuals, but in particular women, to get access to an executive coach type work course without the fees associated with an executive coach. You know, like Celina, you know, it's hundreds of dollars an hour. And I just don't think that that's fair. And especially in this world where we have these growing populism, you know, growing sort of a discrimination that is happening on many levels, I think what we need to do as human beings is to really give women in particular, because we know that when we give women the tools to reach their maximum potential, they will give back to their communities. In fact, McKinsey did a report in 2016. McKinsey and Company did a report that showed that when women are given the tools to reach their maximum potential, they will add 12 to 28 trillion dollars, trillion with a T, to our global GDP. I'm just going to focus on women for right now. What can I give them be able to maximize that potential? And I really think that this course, and showing them the how at a very affordable price, not at even close to hundreds of dollars, but at a very affordable price, can give them those key nuggets that I wish I knew when I was running my business, when I was confused about what to do next, when I was transitioning alcohol and feeling pain, and I didn't know who to turn to because, of course, you know, I was feeling that imposter syndrome, like I can't do this, I don't know what to do. Giving them that guide from someone who really loves her community, that really is passionate about this topic of helping people. And so this course for me is the most important piece, because it is the how, and it is the love that I have for my community in there, understanding the power that we have as people to transform just about anything.
Absolutely. And you know what? I really want to point it out here right now because, you know, some people might think, okay, wait a second. Why would she write a course, right? Like, why would she teach other entrepreneurs? So let's really point out some of your accolades because that's really a testimony on its own, okay? So you actually have won the Toronto Board of Trade's Business Entrepreneur of the Year Award, the Black Business and Professional Association's Harry Jerome Young Entrepreneur Award. So you really know what you're doing, even though you emphasize so many times, oh, I made so many mistakes. But it's not the point how many mistakes you made, but you know what you learned from it, right? And clearly you have you know refined your skills to the highest level. So you know, as someone who is an amazing and award-winning business person, okay, and clearly extremely sharp and from the edge of really wanting to give, why don't you share with us, you know, what's your definition of success, but also what's your purpose that drives you to that success?
Yeah. Oh my God. Great question. So it's interesting because my definition of success has changed, right? As I've been able to live in my purpose, right? So, you know, as an entrepreneur, for 2005, 2015, I owned a healthcare-based research management firm. My success was driven by the number of zeros in the paychecks that I received, right? Like the big house, the cars, the money, and that was in you know, my 30s, that was my purpose. My purpose was to go on the fancy trips and eat on the fancy restaurants and stuff like that. And I was burning out. I was totally out and just thinking, oh my goodness, is this all? Because every time I went somewhere, I had like a phone, a laptop, a iPad, you know, I had notebooks and plugs and cords and all this stuff. And it was really, there was no downtime. And so the process, and I don't know if we'll have time to get into it, but going through politics really made me understand how powerful your voice can be and how much. So while I was in politics, I spoke about mental health, as you mentioned. I spoke about equity. I spoke about justice, often to the times where I'd get gaslit. Like I'd get such negative messages from people because, you know, I'm not supposed to talk about equity. I'm not supposed to talk about racism. I'm not supposed to talk about mental health. And I would get these nasty messages, and it was so painful to receive them. But I kept thinking, if I'm not talking about them, who will? Who is going to stand up for the little person who wants that equity, who wants that justice? And I realized that that was my purpose. My purpose was around really a sense of advocacy that was rooted in equity, that was rooted in understanding. And I think my mental health struggles really gave me that humility, because it did make me not like this superhuman person. It made me vulnerable. And so the ability to marry those two things together really helped me understand how I now define success, which is living purposefully and living authentically. And that doesn't come with a dollar sign. That's not what that is about. It is about, when I talk about purposefully, it is intentionally trying to help the people that matter to me the most. And because I left politics, doesn't mean that I don't advocate for my community. It means that I advocate for them more without the strings of political party attachment or affiliation or partisanship. I'm able to do that more. And so, you know, I write a course like this, and you're right. Why would I ever put this out for, you know, next to nothing? It's because it's bigger than me. What our world needs right now is for people who have small ideas, people who have medium-sized ideas, and people who have big ideas to show up, to let those ideas live. And if I could be even a small part in helping them navigate some of those uncomfortable and dark spaces where it's the unknown, I want to do that. And in the same way you're using this platform, in a way that allows these stories to be amplified. I saw that you did the one with the amazing Tracy. I love her. You're using these platforms to help people. That is what we need to do in this world. That is where our humanity and our empathy for each other comes from. We have to be able to hear those stories, to be able to understand those lived experiences, to understand why something like speaking up about racism means something to me, because I've been a recipient. It's not just because I haven't experienced, homophobia or xenophobia that I can't speak up about it. It's because I've experienced racism that I know that I should also speak up about those other issues, about homophobia, about sexism, about racism, about all those discriminations, in order to be able to create that equity that the world needs. But we can only do that if we share our stories. And so I'm so grateful to this platform for allowing that to happen. It's so critical to our existence, and it's so powerful. So I applaud you.
I thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I appreciate everything for what you do, and this compliment to me is meaning a lot to me. Now, what would be your advice to our audience who's listening in terms of how can they pivot? How can they, take your advice and take it to the next level?
So this question is so important, because I think we'll overthink what that means. And it really is simple. It's about authenticity. It's about understanding that everything you've done in your life, every single aspect, every person you've interacted with, every pain, every mistake, every joy, every triumph, all the strengths, all your weaknesses, everything you've learned, all the plastic education, but everything you've learned in life has brought you to this point. And therefore, all of those experiences are valuable, are assets to organizations. So oftentimes when we go into organizations, or we think about starting a business, or we think about doing things differently, we get scared about that, because the pre-existing norms that exist may or may not look like us, may or may not represent things that we are accustomed with. And so we try to change. We make ourselves a little smaller to fit in, because we want to fit in. We want to be a part of the popular crowd. Like, we've done that ever since, elementary school. The problem with that is, if we want organizations to change, if we want things to be different, if we want our world to be equitable, if we keep trying to make ourselves smaller or to try to fit into pre-existing narratives, they won't change. They won't get any better. We need to show up authentically. So even if we had 2 Black women immigrated to Canada, had similar experiences, we will be 2 totally different people. Our experiences will be totally different. And both of those experiences are valuable to organizations. And I spoke about McKinsey & Company before, and I'll reference them again, because they're a global consulting firm and they do this for a living. They did a report that showed that the cost of racial inequity to the United States was billions of dollars. So when we think about that cost, the reverse of that is, if we get rid of these sort of barriers, these structures that impede people from actually living their authentic lives, it must add value too. And so when we think about what is the most important asset that we have as individuals, it is our authenticity. It is every single experience that you bring to your community, your school, your workplace, your every single thing that you do. That authenticity is the most valuable asset that you have.
That's actually amazing that you share this. And if you don't mind, I'd like to actually go a little bit deeper in this conversation, because this is a topic that I think people should be hearing and should be taking on and talking more about this, because I don't think that it's talked enough. Even as a parliamentarian, so someone who actually was an MP, okay, you have received the Champion of Mental Health Award, then you also have been chosen and became the Black Parliamentarian of the Year, and so on. So even in the Parliament itself, in that institution, they recognize you as someone who is a change maker. So do you mind actually sharing what that really meant on such a high government level, and how that might have changed in some policies, and how we can all learn from from that? Because if you were able to make changes at that level, which is probably a very dinosaur-like level, then what can it should be easier actually for us to really chime in and help with the movement.
So you know what, I really value what you just said, because if we look at the term democracy people have, and so even in Parliament spoke about mental health, of course, in the 2017 budget to mental health for provinces. So there was the advocacy that was done by myself and other colleagues, and then of course that translated into policy, into the federal government making investments in mental health. Also in 2018, there were investments for the first time in the history of Canada where they specifically put investments into the Black community to create that equity. I think what's really important for people to understand is that democracy doesn't happen every 4 years when you vote. So voting is just one very, very tiny aspect of what you do in terms of contributing to your democracy. When we think about the capacity for people to change political will, people demonstrate or advocate or protest, that is democracy in action. And everybody could do that every single day. There are issues that you're passionate about, that you want to see change on. I mean, social media provides a great platform for some of that grassroots activity to happen, where political parties are swayed, are changed in terms of how they view certain issues, because the people actually have that power. It is the power of the people, the power of their experiences. We saw in Ontario, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, around autism, parents, galvanized together and really use their voices, use their action, use social media, use traditional media to really talk about how those changes were going to negatively impact their children, and got the government to reverse that. That is powerful, and that is the power of advocacy, and that is the power that we have every single day. Whether we choose to use it or not is the question. And people are busy. People are tired. We're living in a pandemic. We have our families. We have to cook and clean and do homework and work and all kinds of other stuff. When do we have time for advocacy? I understand that. But our democracy depends on people, again, being authentic and then using the power that they have to make change in our community, especially for those who need it the most.
I love it. And actually, what's not showing, I'm literally getting chills just by listening to you and really absorbing what you say. And, now it all makes sense. The book title that you chose for yourself, for your own book, that is going to, be published and accessible for everyone, is Can You Hear Me Now? Can You Hear Me Now? Coming to
Yes.
all of us February 2nd, 2021. Let me tell you, I can hear you very well. And I greatly appreciate today that you came to the show and shared all this amazing wisdom and all the nuggets and all the tips and tricks for everyone to really understand where they can actually make a difference in other people's lives, first in their own and then in other people's lives. And I certainly encourage anyone and everyone at this point to reach out to you, to your webpage, and find out more about your book, your course, and everything else, how they can advocate for others to make a difference. So Celina, thank you so much. So tell us just one more time, please.
Oh my
How
God.
can anyone get hold of you, please?
Yeah, so I'd say the easiest way to get in touch with me is celinacc.ca. So CELINACC.ca. That's my website. It has everything that you need to find about me. And then on my social media is my handle for Instagram and Twitter is at I am Celina CC. IAMICC.
Thank you again for coming. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for using your platform for good.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining today's podcast. Annie's podcast showcases various talents, helping you develop the winning mindset to achieve massive success. Want a change in your life? Connect with Annie. Call her at 416-543-6127 and follow her on Facebook and Instagram. Click on the links below.